With a new season comes a new set of predictions. We are back with the Premier League and we are back with our predictions. We're going to be finding out who's going down, who's making that top four, and where the almighty Aston Villa are going to finish. Obviously, as you may notice, usually we do this with Nathan. Unfortunately, due to just being busy and some unfortunate timing, this is the best we're going to have to do. I'm determined to get these prone predictions out, and because I want to see what you think of my results for this season. So without further ado, if you're going to enjoy this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, comment on our social pages or on the video where you think your favourite team's going to be finishing. Without further ado, let's get it started. Okay then, so we're going to be starting from the bottom, starting from 20th place all the way to first. In 20th place, I have got Luton Town. I just don't see Luton Town doing very well this season. A lot of their signings that they've made so far in this window have been League One or Championship signings. Admittedly, in the last few days, you know, the likes of Ross Barkley, Marvellous Nakamba, you know, a player that did really well for them in the Championship, helped them get promoted to the Premier League last season. There's some ish signings here and there, but I think we've got Mads Addison from Barnsley, Tafe Chong from Birmingham City. There are signings there to me that just don't scream the quality need to stay in the Premier League. And also the fact that I just think it'll be really struggling period for them to try and adapt to this league and try and adapt to that, you know, hungry and survival football that needs to stay if they want to be playing top flight football. In 19th place, I've got Sheffield United. You know, for as many signings as they can make, there's as many good signings that they're letting go. You know, the likes of Sander Berge now going all the way to Burnley. You know, they're possible contenders this season, you know, having gone up with them. Indiana going to Olympique Marseille. There's some really good players at Sheffield United, but there's also some signings that have been made that just don't really scream that exciting. And I think ultimately they're going to struggle like they did within the second season that they initially had. I think they're just going to bounce straight back into the Championship and not really pose much of a threat onto the Premier League. In 18th place, I'm going for Wolverhampton Wanderers. It was a bit of a toss-up between them and Everton, but considering the activity over the last week, I think it's very easy to say Wolverhampton Wanderers because it's a bloody mess. Lopetegui obviously leaving the club in the last few days, you know, not being given the promises that he initially felt he deserved when coming onto the role at the club. And him leaving, bringing in Gary O'Neill, no disrespect to what he did to Bournemouth, but that's kind of a bit of a step down. You know, there were fans wanting Lopetegui for so many years, the board wanting him for so many years, to end after 9 months. It's a shambles. Signings wise, the only real one I can think of is obviously Matt Doherty coming back again for a second run. I don't really understand why, but hey ho. Raul Jimenez on the go, Adamar Traore being a free agent, Ruben Neves leaving as well. There's just players there that are missing those key elements. Not as if to say, you know, Raul Jimenez or Adam Traore would have made a massive contribution, but you know what I mean, when they're players that have been there for so long, especially Ruben Neves, who's probably the most influential player last season, it's going to be a big mess. I just think it's one too many steps for them. They wasn't massively great last season. They weren't massively great the year prior. I think this is finally the year that we're going to see them drop into the relegation and ultimately drop back into the Championship zone. 17th then, I've got Everton. I think yet again, it's going to be another struggle for Everton. But in this sense, I think it's not going to come down to the final day. I think there's actually going to be a little bit of a points difference this time. So I think that we'll be safe after a few more games this time. But again, I just don't think it's massively something that they're going to, you know, rebound about. Sign Ashley Young, fair enough. You know, I'm not going to complain. I wanted him to stay another year at Aston Villa, but you know, he wants to play football. Everton going to offer that. Dan Juma is a pretty decent signing, but I just think the whole team of Everton just lacks that creativity and excitement. Something like they had when they had James Rodriguez, Allen. You know, Doucouré, when them three came in the one season, there was a real buzz around Everton for that midfield. And the only one that's really stayed is Doucouré, and he's the only one that's really, you know, helped keep Everton up. I think ultimately, as I said, it's going to be one of those cases where they're going to stay up by a few more points this season, but I think it's just going to be another Josh year. I think Sean Dyche will probably last the whole year as well. And then, who knows, we'll have to see what they do after the year after that. In 16th place, I've got Nottingham Forest. I just think, again, it's going to be another season where they're just going to be around that position area. Some okay science, Anthony Elanga, Matt Turner, you know, trying to bring in more quality players rather than quantity of players. You know what I mean? They spent a bloody good fortune on players last season. I think they've pretty much got their squad solid there and there. It's just trying to find players to mix in and around that. But again, I think it's one of those cases where they're just struggling. They're going to struggle to find the best 11. They're also going to struggle to find players of quality that need to be pursuing forward into that first 11. And I think this is going to be one of those cases. Perhaps we could see Steve Cooper finally relieved of his duties. It all remains to be seen there. 15th place, I've got Bournemouth. Again, sort of the similar same position for Bournemouth this year. Obviously, there's no Gary O'Neill. A very big surprise to a lot of people that he wasn't kept on for a managerial job into the next season, but ultimately they chose to go with a new appointment. Some okay signings as of today, confirming Alex Scott from Bristol City, a very good up-and-coming talent. Max Aarons from Norwich City. God, I've got to think of some names here. Some decent signings, shall we say, made by Bournemouth, but not massively standing out in the market. I just think they're players that will do okay, but ultimately, you know, like in the case of Alex Scott, I think there's players that will just need time to grow into it, and they're not team players that are going to instantly cause that change for Bournemouth. You know, also letting go of the likes of Jefferson Lerma this year, it may be just one of those transitional phases for Bournemouth Football Club. In 14th place, I've got Crystal Palace. Now, obviously, probably the biggest piece of news from Crystal Palace this window so far and going into this season. No Wilfried Zaha after so many years, after so much talking about playing for a Champions League club, he's finally gone and left to Galatasaray. I think there's a bit of a weird move in terms of his career, but ultimately, it's what he wants. I imagine it's more so the wages, but who knows. Obviously, Roy Hodgson, another year of management of him. I think it will slowly transition into where they have a really good start at the beginning of the season. As the time goes on, that Roy Hodgson style of football will come back into it, and they'll start really in that boring time where they're not really winning games. The football's really slow and uninspiring. And again, signing wise, Jefferson Lerma was a really good deal made there. There's a Brazilian Franesco, I can't pronounce his name, but really nothing else there. Nothing that really screams to replace the quality left by Zaha. Whatever you make of him, you know, the real creative outlet for Crystal Palace there has been taken away, and it'll be interesting to see how Palace will bounce around. I think if anything, Palace are one of those teams that if they're going to stay in the mid-table for so many years, just get rid of them. Let's just see him go down and just have somebody that's actually going to bring some life and event to the club, because Palace are just there to fill the numbers for me. And I think, yeah, again, this is one of those positions being in 14th. 13th place then, I have got Brentford Football Club. Obviously, no Ivan Toney, I believe until January or somewhere around there, due to the gambling addiction and problems that you have there. Their main strike, the main guy that you expect to score 20-25 goals with, when he's taken away, you need to act on a replacement. And Brentford really haven't done that. They haven't really made any big out signings this year. Obviously, David Raya is also going to be going to Arsenal on a loan with a buy option, which pretty much means his time at Brentford's come to an end. I think, yet again, you know, whilst they may play good football under Thomas Frank, whilst they may have some key players, perhaps Wemby will be the player to step up. You never know, they could make a move for a striker or just put some faith into their players that they already have. I just think really, without someone like an Ivan Toney, they're not going to see the back of the net as many times. And I think ultimately, it's going to falter and really produce to be one too many steps to climb for Brentford. In 12th place then, I've got Burnley. I think they're going to be kind of like a Fulham in the sense that they're going to surprise a lot of people this year. Some decent signings. Obviously, Vincent Kompany at the helm, managing to lead Burnley to winning the championship last season. I'm looking very impressive with that. I'm very surprised they haven't gone for Nathan Tella from Southampton, obviously playing last week against Sheffield Wednesday. He looked very decent scoring the opening goal in that game. But Nathan Redmond, Sander Berge, you know, there's some experienced players, but there's also some players of youth and some talents and players that also may have that Premier League experience. Like Sander Berge, players that you know can play in the Premier League and will provide some elevated quality to Burnley. I think the style of football is going to really impress a lot of people, kind of like Brentford in the sense of really just going to have at it and that counter-attacking style of football. I think they're really going to do well this season and maybe pull out probably the biggest surprise result, but that remains to be seen. But I think ultimately it would also be a season where they will fall off at some point and they just need to find their balance again in the Premier League. So 12th place for Burnley. 11th place, West Ham United. Obviously, Declan Rice is now gone. Their great English talent has finally left the club, going to the Arsenal. There's also been a mess of signings as of I know as of today they've confirmed Edson Alvarez, who's a really decent player from Ajax, one that they've been targeting for quite a while. They're now starting to make those processes of signings. Obviously, James Ward-Prowse looks to be coming in. Perhaps, and Harry Maguire will be coming in to bolster the defence. I think really they need a solid striker. They can't rely on players like Bowen. Mikel Antonio is not really scoring a massive amount of goals when he is playing. I think they need someone to bolster that attacking sense. And perhaps this is the case with the likes of Edson Alvarez and James Ward-Prowse. It puts a bit of energy into midfield, kind of like when Villa tried to replace Jack Grealish with these other 5 players. I think that's what West Ham are going to do, and I think ultimately it's going to result in a bit of a middling season. Obviously, they're going to be wanting to go for the Europa League as well, having won the Conference League last season. But I think it would just be more so them about trying to find their footing in the league and in football in general without Declan Rice down. So 11th place for West Ham United. In 10th place, I've gone for Fulham. Not too many massive signings. I think yet again they're going to have a really strong season, but ultimately fall off towards the end of the year. Calvin Bassey coming in from Ajax to bolster the defence. Some really decent signings. I'm going to keep Willian for another year, although there was the talks of the Saudi offer. Marco Silva staying at the club as well from the Saudis as well, making an offer for a manager who plays there. I think, like I said, it's going to be another season where they have some good results, some good performances, probably bringing in 1 or 2 more players to really bolster up that team, probably perhaps in midfield. Obviously, no Manuel Solomon this year, having gone to Tottenham on a free. That's a great bit of business by Tottenham. But it's ultimately about just trying to find their footing again and perhaps maybe looking at the ball sheet and say, right, we need to be pushing for here. Otherwise, we need to scrap it our plan. And probably that's what's going to be this season for Fulham. Number 9 then, I've gone for Brighton. Obviously, Brighton will be competing in the Europa League this season after a great spell last year under De Zerbi. Not too many signings from what I can recall from Brighton, and ultimately when you're going into these European competitions you need depth, you need that squad rotation so you can have good runs in both. I think really for Brighton, I think they will want to put all their eggs into the Europa League because of the opportunity that it faces should they win it. They might feel confident about it, but I think ultimately that's going to result in a suffering in their league position. They're going to fall out of that place. And I don't think they're in the Europa League either. I think ultimately it's just going to be one too many games for all of them. There's still the FA Cup, the Carabao Cup as well. A lot of games for Brighton to play. They're still going to produce some good football this season, but I just think it's going to come at the expense of their league position. Number 8 then, Aston Villa. A lot of people want to say top 6. I just don't see it. It's not that I'm feeling negative. I think it's more of the sense of we're going to be putting our eggs in the Conference League because I think we're winning the Conference League. I think that is where the club are going to be aiming this season. I would love to be surprised. I've said this before. Would you take a low finish this year for the sake of winning a trophy like the Conference League or whatnot? Or would you take a really high finish again, but can't win silver? I think for me, as I said, no disrespect to West Ham. They had a great run of it last year. But if a team like West Ham can win it, I don't see why we can't. We've had a great run ever since Unai Emery's come into the club. The signing of players that we have made this year, Yuri Tielemans, Pau Torres, a target that Emery's been chasing since his appointment at Aston Villa. It's finally come to fruition. And Moussa Diaby, that is a player that really screams of that next level of ambition for the club. And I think that is something that we'll see. We have seen it in pre-season. All 3 of these players have really been helpful contributions. Obviously, as of recording, it has been confirmed that Emery Buendia has suffered a crucial knee injury that has pretty much ruled out his season, with the clubs now looking for a potential loan move for Nico Zaniolo from Galatasaray. I like him. He's really talented, really somebody that can come across in the future. Yes, he is. He's very injury prone. He's already done his ACL in twice, so you've got to work out there. I do also think there needs to be 1 or 2 more signings in the attacking sense. I would still like to see another right back come in for cover, but I'd be perfectly fine with seeing Chambers there to fill that role. But like I said, Ashley Young, if anything, could have filled that role for another year. And also, if we're getting rid of Cameron Archer, we've still got players that have been reported not to be fit and ready for that first game of the season against Newcastle United. I'd like to see some more depth in there. I'd like to see someone that can actually challenge Watkins for that position, or at least be a suitable replacement source for those Conference League games. But I think ultimately Villa, for me, they'll be putting their eggs into the Conference League. I think we're going to go all out, and I think we are going to win it and finally bring home some silverware for Aston Villa Football Club. It's going to be exciting. European nights are back. That we're going to be going away. We're going to be home. I think we're going to do it all. But I think it's going to come at the expense of a league position, which I don't mind. As I said, win the Conference League, win the Europa League. It's silverware. We're going to be going for even bigger. It's a win-win for me. So I'm happy to take Aston Villa in 8th place this year. In 7th place then, I've gone for Tottenham Hotspur. I would have put them higher, but I'm purely just going off of a feeling here. Whilst they have made some great signings, obviously Ange Postecoglou coming in at the managerial helm, I think the style of football that he played with Celtic was great. I think it was a no-brainer for Tottenham to try and bring him in. It was great seeing them. And then the signings that they've made as well, obviously making Kulusevski on a permanent. James Maddison for around 35-40 million. I think that's a great bit of business there. A player that anybody should have been looking at in that top 7 to 8 teams. Mano Solomon, as I mentioned, on a free. They've gone for a new goalkeeper, and they're also looking to add more and more players. Mickey van der Vaart, I think it was, from Wolfsburg. Some great signings there. I think they are going to surprise a lot of people this year. Obviously, Harry Kane, is he going to be staying with the 100 million bid now being apparently accepted by Tottenham Hotspur? But Harry Kane himself possibly being a bit hesitant towards the move. Is he going to be saying if he is, that's one more year. There's a good chance that they can push on and perhaps go for some silverware finally. Might convince Harry Kane that there is a future. It is a big year for Tottenham Hotspur. Like I said, new manager, Harry Kane's last year. Are they going to deliver, or are they going to falter and ultimately have just another season in the Premier League? Who knows? But I'm going for Tottenham Hotspur in 7th place. In 6th place then, I'm going for Newcastle United. I think for me, the Champions League is going to really prove to start to be the downfall for Newcastle United. You know, they've got a great squad. They've done really well last season. Not well enough because we've been 3-0 home. But I think ultimately the Champions League is going to take the toll. Like a lot of these teams, these European competitions and these extra games are going to take the toll. Some decent signings, obviously Sandro Tonali from AC Milan. That is a top quality signing, a real great pull for Newcastle United. Harvey Barnes as well. Tivro Livramento from Southampton for cover at left back. There are some great players that are coming into the squad alongside what has really been shone through by Eddie Howe. There's great backing. They're going to love their Champions League nights, but I think that is going to come at the expense of their league position as well. Not too much in the sense of they're going to fall out of that top 6, as I said, mentioned in 6th place there. I think they are going to probably finish in the Europa League spot, but I think Champions League will be a decent time for them, and ultimately a decent season for Newcastle United. Next up then, in 5th place, I've gone for Chelsea. It's going to be a transitional phase for Chelsea. Obviously, some new signings, a new manager, Mauricio Pochettino, Christopher Nkunku coming in from RB Leipzig, a great signing, although unfortunately he has got himself injured. So their star man is straight away out. I think it would have been a massive help for them. So perhaps they need to look for some more perhaps additions. Nico Jackson coming in from Villarreal. I think he's looked like a real decent signing. Reportedly they were willing to trigger the release clause of Tyler Adams. Some really unique, interesting signings from Chelsea. And they're not perhaps focusing on more of those big money spending players, but more so looking around towards, say, getting value for money. And I think the likes of Nkunku, the likes of Nicola Jackson, the likes of I can't think of his name, I've totally forgotten it. The right back from Leeds. I think players like that, that's really going to help. And I think also under like Mauricio Pochettino, he's going to bring some stability into Chelsea and finally put them somewhere where they need to be, which is at least on track to try and get back to the Champions League. But I think just with the other teams around them, I think they are going to falter a little bit short. So like I said, it's going to be probably about finding their feet for them. And I think they're going to be finishing in 5th place for the Europa League for Chelsea. So then we get to the top 4. In 4th place, I'm going with Manchester United. I think yet again, it's going to be one of those years where they're a bit tipsy-turvy, but ultimately they pull it out of the bag. They get into that Champions League spot under Erik ten Hag. Some okay-ish signings, but even anything not really perhaps a light in the world, very predictable signings. Mason Mount coming in from Chelsea, that's a big money move, and considering what we've seen of him in pre-season, I think he's got a lot to deliver for the money and the ambition that Manchester United have shown him. Andre Onana coming in from Inter Milan to replace David De Gea following his departure from the club. It'll be interesting to see how he's going to fill those shoes there. Rasmus Højlund as the new striker from Atalanta. Interesting to see, for his age, can he deliver? But like I said, they've still got Marcus Rashford for more years. They've still got Bruno Fernandes in the midfield. They're still going to have Casemiro. They are trying to ship players out. Like I said, Harry Maguire, Scott McTominay. But I just think a decent run in the Champions League, a few decent cup runs, and ultimately a strong finish in the league for Manchester United. In 3rd place, Arsenal. I don't see Arsenal challenging. I think this is where they will fall off a little bit. Like I said, with European competitions, I think teams are going to be putting effort into going for those positions. And I think ultimately this is one of those where they will look at it and say, yeah, too many games this season. Obviously, some decent signings. Declan Rice being made from West Ham, a signing that they've been wanting for a while, and finally getting it over the line after that brief period of trying to negotiate the pet. Hey, sorry about that. But they've got their main man in midfield, Justin Timber as well, to provide some cover there. I think he's going to be looking like a real solid addition for their playing, perhaps alongside Sleeper. Yeah, well, Kai Havertz, a real player that is going to surprise a lot of people, but I think he's been a little bit decent for Arsenal. I think this is where we'll finally see Kai Havertz flourish after 3 or 4 years of disappointing performances at Chelsea. But like I said, I think they're going to want to pursue a silverware trophy this year, perhaps a really strong finish in the Champions League. They've got the depth there. It's just a case of, can they get it over the line? Can they finally bring some trophy home back that is not an FA Cup? Who knows? But I don't see him challenging this year. I think it's pretty obvious he's going to be first place again. But I think Arsenal will be finishing third this year in the Premier League. So in second, then I'm going with Liverpool. I think Liverpool are going to surprise a lot of people this year. Obviously, a little bit of an ipsy-urby year last season. No Sadio Mane. Players getting injured like Luis Diaz and Diogo Jota. That's a real problem with Liverpool. They've been a team that have massively been hampered by injuries, but they've also brought in some good signings. Obviously, Szoboszlai coming in from RB Leipzig as well for big money. I think that's a great signing. It's just going to take time for him to get used to it. McAllister from Brighton, that's another great signing there. Shifting players on like Henderson and Fabinho, players that have perhaps reached that age where they're not contributing anymore, and finally just reinvest into the squad. They're going to have players coming back. I think Darwin Núñez is finally going to start putting his foot on the pedal and going for it this season. Diogo Jota's on form. Luis Diaz is going to be coming back. There's some players there that's really going to start. Obviously, will Salah be able to pick up some more goals this year? Who knows? But I think Liverpool are going to have a strong season this year. And then finally, it's going to be Man City, isn't it? I think ultimately, after the strong treble win last year, they've gone and rebolstered as well. Obviously, adding Kovacic from Chelsea, an interesting signing to replace Gundogan having left the club. And obviously, Josko Gvardiol from RB Leipzig as well, another great centre-half. They just really bolster it. I mean, look at their bloody defence. Akanji, Stones, Diaz, Gvardiol. Solid defence as well. I think Laporte is still with the club as well. It's going to be hard to challenge them. Are they going to repeat it again this year? Possibly. I don't really see a team strong enough like Man City to go for them. If anything, perhaps Real Madrid could be an option. But I think ultimately Man City are going to clean sweep the league. I think they're going to do really well in the Champions League. It's a bit of a toss for a coin, but I think they probably will win the Champions League again. And I think ultimately this could perhaps... That's my dog there. They could perhaps be ultimately the last year for Pep Guardiola, having won it all pretty much at City. Maybe this could be the final year. He'll sit there and say what comes of it and maybe go out on about for Manchester City. Alright then, that's going to wrap up those Premier League predictions. Tell me in the comments down below what you think of those. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree? Let us know. That's the whole point of these videos, to have a discussion. But obviously, it is an exciting time to see new teams coming up. Villa in the Conference League. Can we go all the way? Yes, we can. Bob the Builder says it so. But obviously, follow us on the social pages where you can check us out there. Without further ado, the Premier League is back. Up the Villa with a pride of Villa. We'll see you for the next game, boys.